Hello there everyone, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns and today I'm going to show you how to make a wirework wedding ring, and mine look like this here. So these are the two that I made, so I made both one in silver and also one in copper to show you how they can look different depending on the materials that you use. But then what we have is a nice rose montee right here in the middle that adds beautiful sparkle, and then I've used the wirework to add kind of a flourish around it using these loops here, and obviously we have a ring band all the way around as well. It's nice and comfortable. And this is then what they look like on. So you can see they give a really nice impact, especially with the bling from that rose montee in the middle, but they're still nice and elegant as well. So I thought I would make some wedding related jewelry because we have the royal wedding coming up in the UK. And these are then the rings that I've made. So like I said, the silver one and the copper one. Now I've made a whole suite of jewelry, so I'm going to be posting tutorials for all of it, one at a time. This is then the ring version. Obviously you don't have to use it as a wedding ring, it also works fine for any other occasion. But if you want to learn how to make this ring, then keep watching. So it's these materials here that we're going to need. I have two different gauges of regular round silver coated copper wire here. The first one is a 1mm thickness. This is going to be the base wire. And then I have a 0.4mm thickness, and this is going to be the weaving wire. And then for the sparkle that we add in, I have a 6mm Swarovski rose montee, and this is a crystal AB. Now there's going to be a material list along with links down in the description box below, so check that out. Otherwise, let's get the materials ready and let's get started. So then for the lengths of wires that we'll need, first of all here I have a length of my 1mm wire of about 35 centimeters. So this is the base wire that's going to form the ring band and the flourish on the top. And then we need a length of the 0.4mm of about 1 meter and 30 centimeters. This is going to be the weaving wire around the ring band and also the wire we use to attach the rose montee. So firstly we'll grab the length of the base wire here, and then we need to shape this before we can start weaving anything. So therefore I also need my ring mandrel, and we're also going to use that obviously to help size the ring. Now what I've found with this ring is when we kind of start weaving, it's actually going to shrink about 2 sizes, and that's according to UK sizes. So therefore when you're shaping this, you want to make sure you shape it about 2 sizes larger than what you actually want to end up with. That's what I found anyway. So for that reason, I want to then place it roughly around this size that we want. Now what I also recommend that you do, because what you might find is when you shape it around like this and you then let go, it'll spring open a little bit. So actually it will naturally become larger and you can bring it further down. So therefore I actually start shaping it a little bit further down my mandrel, so basically smaller, because it springs open when you let it go, and then it'll come down and then actually fit the size that you'd want it to be, obviously larger than we actually need at the end. So I've wrapped my wire around like this in the middle of the wire, now one full round, but I need to continue to wrap it again because we need to have 2 wires laying next to each other to be able to weave on the ring band. And I'm just going to keep checking here, kind of let go of it so I'm not pushing this tight right now, and then bring it down to see if it's going to end up fitting the size that I'm looking for, obviously the larger size, and just keep bringing it around. So we still, again, have the 2 ends overlap, but you have this wire in the middle of them as well. So basically it's wrapped around 3 times up here, but around the back of it we have it twice. So 2 wires laying next to each other. And then we just have the ends here, the tails that we have left on either end, going out to the side, so just leave them like that for now. So double check, bringing it down there to the size, 2 sizes larger than you want, according to UK size, so something like that. So we have the shape in place now. Then I can take this off and we can actually start weaving. So I'll bring in the length of weaving wire that we've already cut here, and then I want to first of all attach this to the ring band that we've kind of shaped so far. So I'm actually going to put one end there of the weaving wire through my ring band, so through these loops that I've made. I'm just going to start on one side here, so just after where those 2 wires overlap each other. And you want to make sure to leave a bit of a tail here because we're going to use that to then attach the rose montee, so about 10 to 15 centimeters or so, should be plenty. And then I'm just holding on to it there with my finger underneath, pushing it up against those wires there forming the ring band. Now the weave that I'm going to be using is a diagonal wire weave. You can choose a different weave if you want to that uses 2 base wires, it's completely up to you. I'm just going to show you how to do this one. So what we need to do is, it's a little bit fiddly because obviously we have the shape in place, so we kind of have to weave the wire in and out slightly differently, but it's the same basic weave. So I need to bring my weaving wire here, the long length that I'm working with and weaving with, I push that through the 2 wires like that, and then I kind of use my finger here to push it through the ring band to come out the same way that I did before, because then that does it so I pull that tight and it now wraps around that single wire by itself. So it's more or less attached now as well, but obviously you can still move up and down the wire. So then I need to bring it across the top of both of them like this here, and then as I'm bringing it through, instead of bringing it all the way through, we need to actually come up and out between the 2 wires now. So I'm just pushing it through like that, and then I pull the whole tail through. So you can see now it's coming up between, and I then push that down against the other wraps that I've done to then come around over the top of the top base wire there by itself, and then I just push it all the way through to come back out in the same direction again as the beginning. And this is basically one full round. Just kind of move it a little bit, you can see. So we wrapped around the bottom one by itself first of all, then I wrapped over the top of both of them, and then around the top one by itself. And I'm back to the starting point now. So you can also move it a little bit to the back really, and kind of start your weave like that. Maybe it's a little bit easier to work with. Push the wire down between the 2 base wires to start another round. As you can see here, there's a little bit more space to work with, but it's completely up to you how you feel most comfortable. And then bring it over the top of both of them, but come up between the 2 base wires from inside the ring band. And make sure you then push it down there so we also get a nice and tight wrap and weave over the top of that top one by itself, and push it all the way down through the ring band. And again, tighten that and push them close together. Now what can also be really helpful, especially in the beginning, because it's still a little bit loose to work with, is just pushing the wraps nice and tight together there. As you can see, I can still move it up and down. So once I've done a few rounds here, what I like to do is make sure if I'm not working there already, basically push it up towards the point where these 2 ends of the wire there, the base wire, overlap each other, because that's where we need the weave to start from. And you just keep working like this all the way around until we get to the other side. Then obviously we kind of then run out of space to weave around as well. Now what I also just want to mention before I get too far with the weaving here is to just double check your sizing, at least throughout the beginning part here, just to make sure it stays the size that you want it to have. So bring your ring mandrel back out and just put it back on there to make sure it still has that size that we initially shaped it to have. So just double check on that, and just a little bit here in the beginning, because once we've weaved a bit more, it's going to stick with the size. It's just, while it's still loose in the beginning, it has a bit more of a tendency to maybe want to move around a bit. So just make sure you double check that, but otherwise keep weaving. So I've made it further around now, and I just want to show you how you can change up the weaving a little bit to make it easier, because when we get to this point here, you're going to find that one end is going to be open. So I'm just going to start the next round in the exact same way. So push it down through between the 2 base wires, but then instead of, when we bring it over the top of the 2 like that, that's the same, but instead of pushing it down through and then pushing it up between the 2 base wires, because this end is open now, I can just make sure that I've brought it across the top of both of them there, and then bring it to the end of this base wire, and you literally just bring it in between, and it slides right in where we want it to sit, instead of kind of feeding it through from the inside of the ring band. And then you just push it down through again to wrap around the top one by itself. So there we go. It's just a little change to make the actual weaving a bit easier, because we have that open end. So just keep doing that until you meet back up here where the wires cross over each other. So I've kept weaving here until the ends of my weave almost meet up in the middle, except I have left a little gap of about 5mm or so, just because that's going to give a nice space and place to put our rose montee. But then what we need to do is start shaping the tails of the base wire. So first of all, I need to bring them out to the side where they're kind of coming from. So I'm just going to take my chain nose pliers. We can first of all open them up a little bit so we can get the pliers in. And then what we want to do is grab as far in as you can get your pliers, right after where the weave ends, and then start bending it back out to that same side where it's coming from, and give it a nice angle there. As sharp a bend as we can, so something a bit like that. And then basically what we're bending it to is so we have enough space between this length of the wire and the weave and the ring band to make our first little loop, you could say. But we can always adjust it a bit more. Same on the other side. Bend it back as far in as you can get your pliers. And then put that bend in so we get it going back out to the opposite side. Kind of bend it back on itself. And you can see we get a nice line across the two of them there, going in the same direction. So something like that. And we can always adjust it a bit more if we need to. Then what I'm also just going to do is bring the weaving wires to the side where they're actually coming from. So just bring them through the ring band. So they're coming out to that side where they have the last wrap. So something a bit like this. Now what I also just like to do is keep my rose montee handy here, because we can then use that to just measure a little bit against. I like to kind of do that throughout to make sure I'm on the right track. So you can see it's going to fit nicely there over that bare length of wire right there in the middle and cover that just perfectly. So now I'm going to grab my 6-step bail making pliers to use the loops that we need to. Now I'm using these because I know exactly what size loop I'm going to get by using a certain step on them. You can use round nose pliers if you want to, but you have to just judge it by eye, as obviously they are tapered, so you can get different sizes. So for the first loop that we're going to make here, I'm going to be using the second smallest step on my pliers, and I'm going to place my wire just starting on one side here of the ring. So I'm just going to place my pliers on the wire pretty much as far down, so when I finish this loop it's going to be the size and shape that I want it to have. So I'm placing it here, not all the way down as far as it'll go, but just a little bit out the wire. You can see we have a nice spacing there. Then I want to bring the long end around my pliers here. Let's get the tail out of the way. Going towards the ring band first of all. So just like this, and then overlapping there. Now what I like to do is just take a piece out a little bit, have a look at it, and if you need to, you can adjust this. So if you want it actually a little bit closer, you took it a little bit too far away from where the wire starts, you can roll it in and kind of make the loop a bit smaller, but keeping the shape. Or you can also open it up by rolling it out. And then bring the wire back out straight like this. So it just crosses over the edge of the ring band there. Take it out, have a look at it, see if you're happy with it. Otherwise you can tighten it up a bit more. But still keep making sure that the other side here of the wire lays nice and straight just over the edge of the ring band, just like that there. Just keep adjusting it until you're happy with it. And for now I'm just going to leave this tail there and swap to the other side, because I like to kind of make the two sides simultaneously alongside each other to get them as symmetrical as possible. And you can first of all just push this end down a little bit to get it out of the way. So place the pliers in the same point on that side here, and again bring the tail around the pliers going towards the ring band to complete this little loop that we want to make. And make sure it comes straight out. And also when you need to just smooth out the wire, because it might misshape a little bit as you're moving it around because of the heat of your fingers. And again, make sure that that side just slightly overlaps the edge of the ring band. And then just take it out and have a look and see how symmetrical they look. Obviously we want to get them as symmetrical as possible, but just judge that by eye until you're happy with it. If you need to again tighten it up or open it up, you can do that now by comparing these two sides together. So like I said, what you can do is also keep that rose montee handy there, so we can just check it and adjust it as we go, because you're better off, if anything needs adjusting, doing that before we move on to the next step. So keep that in mind there. Check the sizing is right, and if you're happy with how it's going to look, then we could just move on to the next loop in the middle. So first of all, we just need to bring the wires in the right position. Again, working one side at a time. I want to keep hold of that little loop that I've already done. And then I'm just going to make sure that wire doesn't move out of place and it keeps its shape. Then I'm going to push the tail here up a little bit, from the very bottom there of that loop, so it gets in position for the next loop we're going to make, that middle one. Same on the other side, just push that up, and again, so the wires are going kind of in the same direction there, almost continuing each other, that same angle. And we can always check again that the rose montee is going to fit in there, and looks to fit pretty much perfectly. Now we need to bring in the 6-step bell making pliers again. So for the next loop, I want that to be a little bit larger because it's the middle one. So what I'm going to do is go to the next step down on my bell making pliers here. So it's going to be the third smallest. And again, we need to go up a little bit on the wire. So not all the way far down as it'll go, but just leave a little bit of space between that first loop and then where the pliers sit. Again, just do one side at a time. So place your pliers where you want that loop to be. And we can also still adjust it if it's not going to be quite right once we make it. But then bring the long end of the wire around, all the way around like this. And have it come back across the top of itself to create that loop there. Like I say, if you need to adjust it, you can roll it out or you can roll it in. So that still keeps the shape. Just start with that side there, and before adjusting this too much, I like going to the other side and doing the same, because like I said, working simultaneously here alongside each other, it guarantees more that you're going to be able to get it as symmetrical as possible. Because then, once we made both of these, we can then look at them together and then adjust them if we need to, according to each other, because both of these obviously we want to be in the middle. So place your pliers, and then bring the long end around till it crosses over itself and we create that loop. And you can see we have some space between the two loops as well. So now I'm going to take the pliers out, and basically we then need to compare and see if we need to adjust anything. So place your ring in front of you here, so we have that wire in the middle going straight across to give you a nice impression of how symmetrical they look across from each other. And also again, you can use the rose montee to help with that, because you can see here we're slowly creating a space in the middle for that to sit in. It's going to sit something a bit like this. So you can see first of all if there's space for it, otherwise obviously you need to adjust it a bit as well to make space if it's a bit too tight. But also just to give a good impression of how it will look symmetrically. To kind of place it how it would sit, obviously once we attach it. And if you feel pretty happy with how it looks so far, then what we've got to do is move to the last loop on either side. And again, to get the wire ready, I just want to hold on to the previous loop and then bring it further back out to the side, because we basically need this last one to look like the first one then. So first of all, get it in position until you're happy with that, still keeping the shape of the other ones, and then flip it around and do the same thing with the wire on the other side. So you can see this wire here now lays just above the ring band basically, and it's going to look nice and symmetrical on each side with the very first loop that we made. So now we have a wire in position, and we need to bring back in the 6-step bell making pliers to make the last loop again the same size as the first one. So I'll take it back to my second smallest step on the pliers here, and then I'm going to place them where I want that loop to be. Now what I like to do is kind of use the first loop on the opposite side here to kind of get a guide for where I need to place the pliers. Obviously we can still adjust it after we've made it, but just to get a good idea so we don't go too far out or too close in. I think somewhere a bit around there, and then bring the tail back around, again just over the top of itself for now, so we get that final loop. As you can see as well, I've kind of pushed out the wire a little bit to get space for the pliers, but you can always make the loop and then just push it back in. So it's just to be able to put the pliers in place, and then just have that loop in there for now. And then I go to the other side and do the same thing. Just kind of push this a little bit out of the way. Place the pliers using the first loop on the opposite side. Something a bit like that. And then bring the tail all the way around it, to create that final loop and just cross it over itself. Something like that. And then you can remove your pliers and just have a good look at it and see if they're the right size and position. And kind of basically line them up both with the same side where they're coming from, but also with the first loop, like I said, on the other side. Just need to curl that in a little bit more, I think, so this doesn't stick out too far compared to the one opposite it there. And then obviously maneuver anything in place that you need to. Check the other side as well. And then basically just keep maneuvering this until you're happy with how it looks and it's as symmetrical as you possibly can get it. Because then we just need to get rid of the excess of these base wires. So to cut off the excess, I'm going to get some flush cutters here so we can get a nice clean cut. And I'm just going to start with one side at a time. And we basically want to cut it where the loop that we made completes, but we cut off the excess, so right where it overlaps basically. So just put your pliers in there. And I like to put it just on the inside of where that wire overlaps, because when I then cut off the excess like that, I can then flatten it down. So basically the very end of the wire there now meets up against the side of itself further back, but it still completes the loop there. And obviously flip it around and do the same thing with the other side. Now we've got a little bit more space, we've got rid of one of them, so they're not kind of fighting with each other there in the middle. Cut off the excess and then flatten it down so the end of the wire basically gets hidden away by putting up against itself. And there we can really see as well with the excess wire gotten rid of if it's still asymmetrical. And that's now completed that final loop as well. So we've made all our loops now. And obviously if you need to kind of push anything close together, you can just do that. But then what we have to do is obviously attach our rose montee right there in the middle. And to do that, I'm going to use the rest that I have left of my weaving wire because it's already kind of in place. So what I first of all just need to do is bring it towards the inside. So the wire I have on this side here is coming out underneath. So I just want to bring it around the open gap there and then in towards the middle. And the same with the other one. So basically they're coming around the base wire in that final wrap. And then I'm going to get to the ends and then get my rose montee. And we have this little cross on the back of it, kind of X-shaped there where we have the channels going through, and that's where we're going to put the wire through. Now I'm going to start with one of them. So it doesn't matter which one you go through first of all. Go through one of the channels there from one side, and then I want to take the other wire, go through the same channel from the opposite side. So just like this here, and then we pull it tight. So just kind of gently pull the wires through the channel until it comes down closer and closer to the actual ring. And obviously be careful to not kind of damage the wire in any way. Just pull it tight until you don't have any excess wire left there. And it ends up sitting nice and flat right in that kind of gap in the middle that we created for it as we were making the loops. So just however you need to help it along, you can push it down a little bit while pulling on the wire until it becomes nice and flat like this. And then we have the wires going through that channel but kind of out to each their own side. And we then need to attach them as well, because obviously we need to make sure this is nice and secure. So working with one length of the weaving wire here at a time, just start with whichever side you want to. I'm going to take the length here, it's coming currently over the wires that are making the loop there. So I'm just going to let it go over, and then we need to bring it around and wrap it a few times to make sure to fasten it. So what you're going to have is a little space basically in between the rose montee and then this little wire that kind of connects the two loops there. And I want to make sure that my weaving wire here comes up in that gap. And then as I pull this tight, it makes a wrap around that wire there, base wire in between the loops. And I want to do this a couple of times. And make sure when we're wrapping this wire and pulling it tight, make these little wraps here, that they lay flat next to each other. You can also use some chain nose pliers to help push the wraps together to make it nice and neat. Something a bit like that. And then what we need to do is bring it to the other side, because we also need to go through the other hole there that we haven't gone through yet. But you can also just do it on the other side. Make sure we fasten this so the rose montee does not really risk of it moving around anymore. In the same place, we go up through that gap and pull the wire all the way through. And then again, do this a couple of times. Making sure the wraps are flat next to each other so they don't kind of cross over and under each other. And again, push them nice and close to make it neat looking. And then I want to move over to the other side. Like I said, it doesn't matter if you just continue here. I'm just going to bring it around the back of this large loop. So it's coming from, in this case here, looking on the left, and then bringing it back around that large loop over towards the right side. And now I want to initially start making some wraps around this length of wire in between the middle and the last loop there. So we now want to go down through that gap in the middle. So basically the same place, and just make sure to pull that tight. And then do that again. So another wrap just after the last one. You need to open it up a little bit. Push that through. So we can pull it all the way and basically tighten it. Like that, and again I just want to push them nice and close together. Now before I bring it through, I like to kind of just go to the other side and do the same thing. It doesn't really matter, but it's kind of like doing it simultaneously. Bring this through as well in that little gap. So like I said, and this time here we're doing the wraps first before we then go through the rose montee. And a second time. And pull that down, making sure they're flat next to each other. And then we're working our way towards the hole in the rose montee so the wire more natural will fit through. So now I have them both ready, so all we're going to do now is bring them through that other hole in the rose montee. So I'm just going to, as if I'm going to continue wrapping, but instead of going around the wire, I'm going to go through the rose montee here to the opposite side. And pull it nice and tight. And then the same with the other one as well. Bring it through the same hole but in the opposite direction. And it can just be a little bit fiddly to get the wire through, especially if it's a little bit kinked at the end there. I actually think I'm just going to cut off that excess. It's gotten a little bit too misshapen. Then bring it through that hole in the opposite direction. It will fit through, you just maybe have to maneuver it a little bit, because obviously there's already now a few wires in there, in both of the cross channels. So just keep kind of maneuvering your wire through until it comes out on the other side, and you can then pull this tight as well. Just continuing that wrap pretty much. And while we're here, I like to just do my final little squeeze to make sure that they're nice and tight and as even looking as possible. So all that's left to do now, because that rose montee is really tight in there now, it's not going to move around or go anywhere. You can see we also have it centered nicely in the middle. Is basically finish off these weaving wires. So really all you got to do is find somewhere where you feel you have some space and do a couple of wraps. I like to kind of go towards the middle, just to also help hide them a little bit so they're not too obvious. So obviously we already have a few wraps in there now. Something a bit like that. And make sure you do at least 2 wraps here to make sure the wire is nice and secure. Because if you just do one, it's going to have a higher chance of actually maybe just coming undone. Again, I'm using this kind of little gap right in the middle between the rose montee and that large loop, and pulling that down. It's still nice and even looking, and it kind of just blends in. So again, do the same with this. You can bring it around the back. Really however you feel it's going to fit to finish this off. Bring it through so we can do our wraps. And then just one more. Just like this. And then all that's left to do now is finish off the ends. And for that, again, I'm going to get some flush cutters here to get a nice clean cut. Then I'm just going to flip it around because that's where my wire is kind of ending. And then I want to cut it off, so obviously we can just tuck the end away so that's not going to go into our finger while we're wearing it and scratch on any skin. So I'm basically going to cut it so I have a short little tail left. Something like that. We can then use some chain nose pliers and basically flatten down. So almost as if we're continuing the wrap, but obviously we just have that little end, and it then gets hidden and kind of tucked in between the base wires there. And make sure you put your finger over it so you can't feel it. If you can, obviously you need to tuck it in a bit more. Otherwise, it's obviously not going to catch on your finger or skin or anything if you can't feel it running your finger over it. Same thing on the other side. Just cut off the excess, but kind of as if it's continuing to wrap around, so you just leave a short little tail. Like that. And then just make sure to squeeze that down so it just blends in with the rest and that end gets tucked out of the way. And there we go. And once you've done that, you have your finished ring. So now that it's finished, this is what the ring looks like on. And I just made a silver one there and also a copper one to show you how different they can look using different materials, but the same basic technique. So we have a lovely rose montee right there in the middle, adding some lovely sparkle to the piece. And then all the flourishes around, the little loops that we made to give it a nice elegant look. And obviously the ring band going all the way around, it's nice and comfortable to wear as well. So I really hope you enjoy the tutorial for this wedding ring here. Obviously you don't have to use it as a wedding ring, it'll go nice with whatever kind of occasion that you'd want to use it for. I just thought we'd use it to celebrate the royal wedding coming up. And also, like I mentioned, there's going to be a playlist with all these wedding related jewelry that I'm going to be making. So I'm going to put a link to that in the description box below, and I'm going to add to it as I'm making more of these pieces available. So I hope you enjoyed this, thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.